You had the foundry, the Johnson Foundry, which was located at Spite and Dival Creek, and this foundry made made munitions and other pieces of weaponry for the Civil War as well. This is where we get Johnson Avenue in Riverdale, owned by the Johnson family. And just a couple of days ago, we had a descendant of the Johnson family, and they donated Bibles to us and some photographs. So this sort of came to mind. This is perhaps one of the earliest photographs of the Bronx. This was taken in 1857. And this white picket fence here runs along East Tremont Avenue. This picture was taken on a hill, which is what we now call Mount Hope. And it's facing, this will probably be the Grand Concourse now, and Webster Avenue beyond it. So here's an example of how the Bronx looked right before the Civil War. It was very suburban, a lot of farmland, total difference of what we see today. This is now like the bustling area of Jerome Avenue. So it's just a reminder of how things have changed in the Bronx so fast, so dramatically. In the Civil War, you had some soldiers that came from the Bronx, or what we now call the Bronx. This gentleman here, William Michael Sayward of Morrisania, he was a private, and he was with the Hawkins Zouaves. He died on April 19, 1862, according to family records and a registry of muster rolls compiled between 1893 and 1905. Here's just a snapshot of just an expert from his journal entry on his birthday. November 17th, I am 20 years old today. The day passed as usual. The picket guard at the windmill came in and brought in a contraband, a fine-looking man. Seward is speaking of an African American. With them, he was taken to the lieutenant colonel who gave him to the doctor for a cook, etc. When we had our Civil War exhibit, we have his actual diary. And we gave people an opportunity. I would take it out when I have students come in, and I would, have them look through this diary. And it's a very sad story because he died soon after his birthday. He was still on the battlefield. Yeah.
Can you spell his last name, Seward?
Sayward, S-A-W-A-R-D.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
This guy here, this is Franz Siegel. He was a German-born Civil War Union general, and he played a number of roles. And he later served, and he later came back to the Bronx to live on Mott Haven Avenue, which is...
Yeah, his park is over there, Francis.
Ding, 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 ding. And this is the lower portion of the Grand Concourse. And there was a huge funeral procession for him, and we have a park, as the gentleman just mentioned, named after him in back of the county building, which is on the Grand Concourse in East 161st Street.
Very tiny park.
Well, it's high though. It's widely
That park's been
used.
there forever.
Yeah, he is buried in Woodlawn Cemetery.
What's the name of the park?
Franz Siegel Park.
Oh, yes.
Franz
I've
Siegel.
been there. Yeah, it's
Right.
beautiful.
His funeral was at the Old Tanverine Hall, which was built in 1871, and they just tore it down 2 years ago. It was on Cortlandt Avenue and 151st Street. Is anyone familiar with the Bronx Documentary Center? Well, it was right across the street. And they tore it down, and it was sad. And finally, you got, this is Major John Delano, and he was from a friend of the Ferris family, who were a major colonial family of Westchester Square for many years. He was a medical doctor on the Union's Army forces as well. Just give you an example who fought in the Civil War. This is Fort Schuyler in 1861. You see some soldiers here getting ready for the conflict, and you also have African American servants servicing the soldiers at the time.
Question, Major Delano, is that any relationship to Franklin Delano
I'm not sure.
Roosevelt?
I'm not sure. It would be a wild guess, but who knows? Who knows? Yeah.
Are any of those soldiers, except for the one that you said was buried somewhere else, are any of them buried in the Civil War cemetery?
Yes, William Sayward, I believe, he's inside the old West Farm Cemetery.
Oh, really?
Yes, and you have some soldiers who fought in the American Revolution. They didn't die during combat, but they served for the American forces at the time. The New York State Legislature passed the state's first conscription act in 1863. This law ushered in the draft rights that began in New York City on July 11th of that year. The Conscription Act hit poorer men who could not pay their way out particularly hard. In addition, many held the fear that Southern blacks, freed by the Emancipation Proclamation, would come north and take the jobs from the white men. On July 13, 1863, draft riots broke out in New York City and lasted for 4 years. Some were angered and fueled by the Democratic Party. So the draft riots actually made its way up over the Harlem Bridge, which is no longer standing, but it was the lower bridge that connected Manhattan into the South Bronx. And they burned down some telegraph companies and some voting offices in Morrisania. However, when they reached Westchester Square, you had the Harrington School for Boys. It was a military cadet school, and Brainerd Harrington actually gave rifles to these young boys and had them stand out on the porch and aim the guns at the mobs that were trying to come in. So if it wasn't for these heroic efforts, then the mobs would have just taken over the Bronx as well. So this is the Harrington School, which sat on East Tremont Avenue, and this was taken in the 1880s. So just imagine young boys standing on this porch with their rifles pointed out.
One of the things to notice, the prices up there, the money